Welcome, everyone. This is another episode of the Free Speech Forward podcast. This podcast is a joint collaboration between the Institute for Liberal Values and also 1776 Forward, which I've co-founded with Chris, who's also a co-host here on the show. And here we really try to explore the behind-the-scenes stories, get to know the people who are free speech advocates, and learn all about the diverse perspectives that make up free speech. So I'm going to turn it over to Chris, and he's going to introduce our wonderful guest for today, Brandy.
Yes, hi Brandy. Thanks for being with us.
Hello. Hi.
Hi. For those of you who are just tuning in, we've got Brandy Shufutinsky on with us today. She is a fellow with our co-sponsoring organization, the Institute for Liberal Values, and an advisor as well. Just a little bit of background on Brandy. She's a social worker, writer, researcher, and advocate. She holds a doctorate in education from the University of San Francisco in international and multicultural education, and her MSW from the University of Southern California. Dr. Shufutinsky has worked towards advancing the rights of victims and survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault within the military community through practice, education, and research. She is the Director of Education and Community Engagement at the Jewish Institute for Liberal Values. Brandy was a 2021 scholar in residence at the Institute for the Study of Global Anti-Semitism and Policy, Oxford Summer Institute, where she worked to develop curriculum in critical anti-Semitism studies. Currently, she's working towards developing intercultural and academic opportunities to enhance liberal democratic ideals, which we are all about here at 1776 Forward. So we're super excited to have Brandy with us. So with that illustrious introduction, let's dive right in. Brandy, why don't you tell us how you came to being a free speech leader?
I don't consider myself a free speech leader. I'm a free speech participant and advocate. I think that we have plenty of examples around the world of what happens when free speech is quashed, what happens societally, where individual freedoms get taken away. And in the United States, it can be really easy to take the right to express ourselves, free expression, free thought for granted, because it's such a normal part of our culture now. However, we are also seeing indicators, and we have in recent years, that those rights to free speech and free expression and free thought are being infringed upon. So I'm obviously a very happy, proud participant in the American project. And one of the reasons I am is because of those freedoms and liberties that we have in the United States. And I'm very concerned with how they seem to be becoming a little bit more infringed upon and eroded in recent years.
From our perspective, we definitely see that erosion and are concerned with it as well. Can you say more about why you think free speech is so important for you as a self-described participant in the free speech movement? Why is it so important for you personally, and why do you think it's important for society as a whole to flourish?
I think societies that have those freedoms, free speech, free expression, free thought, we see the best possibilities emerge. So when we have people that don't have to go according to prescribed speech, we get ideas, we get curiosity, we get the right questions asked. And personally, I think about that too. You know, when you have space to really think deeply and express yourself, you can play devil's advocate with yourself, with what you may have thought about an issue. When you're presented with new information, you may have the opportunity to change your mind and express yourself in a different manner. And that really is foundational to liberty. And again, I appreciate as an American liberty, above all else, the liberties that we have, that we haven't always had in the United States, and that we obviously see people struggling for around the world, whether that's in, South America with what's happening with elections, or whether that's what's been happening for decades and decades in China and other places like that. We see those liberties being stripped, and it really reduces the individual human. It chips away at humanity. Humans are animals. We're curious. We express ourselves. When those things get eroded, we become more robot-like. And there comes a time where, I think we have to ask the question, what does it mean to live? What does it mean to be alive? And in the United States, thank goodness, we live in a place where we kind of have this live free or die mentality and history and goal, to where it is foundational to being an American as an individual, but then also in our broader society.
Yeah, so well said. I mean, that pretty much is our motto too on free speech, and why we even started up this podcast is to be able to remind everybody of those principles. Because I definitely agree. Even here, it's kind of surprising to see how much that right to expression is being taken for granted, and even now being chipped away, like you said. Kind of the influences both from abroad and then domestically within. So agree completely with what you just said. um, I guess given that context, and especially in the current environment, is there anything that you do in particular to kind of prepare yourself for a uh, either a talk you're giving, advocating for free speech, being a participant in the public discourse, if you will, and debate? I guess when you're going forward to talk with other people on your issue advocacy, what do you do? What's your method or process for preparing?
First, really understanding the subject or argument being discussed. So, understanding not just my position, but possibly other positions, not just the ones that are counter to me, but some that may be just slightly different. Asking myself questions, doing my research on why might somebody come to a completely different conclusion than the one I've come to. And the other part is reminding myself again that as a human, that means we're fallible. So having the humility to know that I may be presented with information where I can change my mind. And again, grateful that I live in a society where that I have the freedom to make a mistake or have a possibly wrong opinion and change my mind. So reminding myself with that. And I think that when I speak, I'm obviously speaking not just from my opinion or from my position, I'm also speaking from my level of expertise, because we all come with expertise in certain subjects and certain manners. And so that's also important, paying attention to facts on the ground, and some things there are objective truths. And then being able to understand and realize that everybody doesn't come to the same conclusion, because we also have subjectiveness. And that's kind of the balance I think we have to hold in such a free society.
I hear that. Now, I'm curious from your expertise, and it sounds like you've actually delved into several interrelated topics. So, one of the questions we love to ask people is, if you had all the money, all the resources, all the time that anyone could ask for, what project would you like to see in the world that you think would help advance the cause of free speech? And it's always fascinating to hear from people's different expertise what they're able to hone in on with this question.
So I think that what is most important, especially in related to American society, but I think that we could probably apply this globally as well, is the underpinnings of education. In the United States, we have a K-12 public school system, free to everybody that's here to achieve, to learn something. And one of the things that needs to be learned is what it means to be a citizen in a free democratic republic. I worry that that piece is really getting chipped away, in some cases intentionally, in many cases not, just not enough resources. But without that foundation, where almost everybody that's here is learning the responsibilities and benefits of being a citizen in a democratic republic, the idea of free speech and free thought, it becomes easier to take those things away. And so my um, focus, even when I don't have all the money in the world, unfortunately, is to really pay attention to that part of society where K-12 education system should be the foundation that we grow citizens from. And in order to do that, the ideas of what it means to be in our democratic constitutional republic rely on making sure that people are knowledgeable about what it means to have free speech and expression, what the freedom means to have it, but also the responsibilities that come with that, along with that freedom. So my focus would be that K-12 education.
I love that. I mean, education is definitely a recurring theme. It was certainly, I think, part of both Joya's and my own answers to this question when we think about it as intellectual activists, for liberal ideas and ideals. As an educator, I'm curious if you personally have been involved in or kind of seen programs that you think are effective in kind of educating on the value of free speech.
I've seen it and experienced it before. I see where it's being taken away. There really is a push away from educating students about the foundations of democracy, the foundations to not just our democracy, our democratic republic in the United States, but the actual roots of democracy worldwide, where how it came about, how the idea came about, how it's obviously been improved upon, how we need to continue to improve upon it because the freedoms and responsibilities that come with that. I don't see enough programming focused on that in K-12. There's a lot of focus on higher education. There's a lot of focus on that level, and not nearly enough on K-12. And my argument always is significantly more people participate in the K-12 education system than in college or university level. So if we're talking about building a foundation, we need to pay attention to the foundation. And one of the basic foundations of citizenship in the United States is K-12 education.
Certainly, yeah, here on that. I mean, I remember even, I'm sure it's far worse today than when I was in school, 25 or whatever years ago. But even then, I found the kind of civic education it was a lot of history and facts, but not necessarily really delving into these principles. So I think that's definitely, part of the emphasis here. I mean, frankly, I think even a whole course on the Bill of Rights and really teasing that out might be really helpful here. One of our last questions is just as a participant in free speech activism, as an educator, and therefore a teacher of youth and any age, any words of advice on how other people can find their voice, stand up, speak out for free speech and liberal values more broadly?
Courage and grace. I think courage to speak up and speak out and to really lean in, all in on the fact that we do have these rights for free speech, freedom of expression, freedom of thought. And then grace that with those rights also means we have space to make mistakes. And so not just being able to allow ourselves room to make mistakes, but allow others and to learn from those. But it really takes a lot of courage, I think, especially nowadays where we're kind of in this type of situation where the courage is kind of being discouraged, where people are being more kind of shuffled into this idea that if you don't think this way, you're bad, your being wrong is bad, that it takes courage to stand up against that type of tide.
Yeah, I mean, I can speak firsthand and agree with that wholeheartedly. It's a great word you use, courage, because it's one we've talked about a lot. And I'm curious, just as a follow on to that, does it feel like courage to you even when you're standing up and speaking out for your values or being a participant in the debate?
No, it doesn't. I think it don't, and it doesn't for me because my personal life experience, I'm not afraid of the darts that get thrown at me. I'm not in a position where I'm vulnerable to being injured by those darts, thankfully. I do have the honor and the privilege to work with an organization and with folks that if I say something wrong or something they disagree with, it's not like I'm going to lose my livelihood. And I know that that is not the case for everybody. So it's not what I'm doing is not courageous because I'm not in a situation where I'm threatened for speaking my mind or thinking the way I do.
Mm,
And I know that there are people that their very livelihood depends on them falling in line. Them speaking up is courageous. What I'm doing is just, I have the honor and privilege of being able to do it.
yeah, well said. And yeah, definitely understand. I mean, I think that to the other virtue you mentioned of grace, I think that's an important part of it also, that giving people the grace and space to stand up and speak out, I think can create an environment where people feel more encouraged to share their voice, regardless of their perspective. And hopefully that same grace takes away some of that threat that people are facing for their livelihoods and the like, which is obviously what the purpose of this podcast is all geared towards emphasizing for people. So thank you very much for those words and sharing your story. That completes our core list of questions. So and that actually completes our time too. So it worked out perfectly. Thank you so much for being with us, Brandy. And for all of our listeners, as a reminder, we come out with a new episode of Free Speech Forward every other Tuesday, every 2 weeks. And you can find us at 1776forward.com, and links to our episodes on ILV's website, ilvalues.org. And as always, our videos post on YouTube, and then the audios are on ILV's Dissidents podcast page on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and most other streaming platforms where you can find podcasts. Thank you. We'll see you next time. Thanks, Brandy.
Thank you.